when this all started for me. And Steve and I were very perplexed. Why would this guy plead guilty to something he didn't do, but why was he not charged with something he did do? So it was it was wrong on both sides. So that's how I kind of got into it. I mean, it's obviously disappointing what happened in DC. I guess my overall takeaway is that, we can talk back and forth about what Durham did wrong. And, he made a lot of mistakes, and we can do a lot of kind of Monday morning quarterbacking on that. And some of it was, pointed out in real time. But I think the bottom line is we all heard the juror come out on the day, like right after, telling the media that the guy shouldn't have been charged because lying to we have bigger problems than lying to the FBI. That's what the juror said. So that's what's called jury nullification. That's when the jury is not going to convict no matter what. They're just not going to do it. And so as much as, Durham does deserve criticism for a bunch of kind of tactical blunders, it didn't matter what he did. There was going to be no conviction of anyone, from Camp Clinton. That just wasn't going to happen.
Well, this is interesting. I already see it. I don't know if it's a debate, but I already see two different sides shaping up, because you're saying that in spite of the fact he made, he made mistakes, there was no way there was going to be a conviction in the DC jury, and I agree with that. And Fool was suggesting, I believe, unless I got it wrong, that that maybe this case shouldn't have been brought. Fool, is that what you were saying, or what were you getting at there?
Not at all. That's not what I'm saying. He definitely lied.
Yeah.
That's in his text message. But the actual lie, when you're trying to convict somebody saying this September 19th that he made this lie to James Baker, the one witness to this crime, is James Baker a credible witness? Do you have reasonable doubt that he made that lie to James Baker? I don't know if I could, I'm not in the jury. I shouldn't ever be in the jury. But, if you're saying, is James Baker a credible witness? There's no other witnesses to this lie. And he says, he's the only person that he definitely lied to me, Sussman. And then later we find out, after Durham has already basically put James Baker on the grand jury, and James Baker says this, later they find the text message that he says that Sussman says that he wasn't representing any client. That's when reasonable doubt starts setting in. It's during the trial, once they started saying that the crime happened on September 19th, that's when reasonable doubt starts saying, there's no doubt that Sussman lied. No doubt that Sussman lied. But once it said September 19th, that's when reasonable doubt starts kicking in. It's how can you say that James Baker is the arbiter of truth? And that's when you have to say that if I was on that jury, I'd be why would I believe this one FBI general counsel who's probably biased at the same time? So that's what I'm saying. Definitely
interesting.
Definitely the crime happened, but unfortunately Durham didn't get that text message early, or he would have had an astounding case and would have been able to made it easily. Actually, going back to what Hans was saying, I think the jury probably would have found him not guilty anyways, because of the bias and what Hans was saying, that the FBI has and the Justice Department has something better to look at. So definitely, I'm not saying that he didn't lie. He definitely committed a crime, but I'm not sure which day he committed the crime on.
Oh, very interesting. Well, look, Hans, let me ask you. This is something I've been thinking about. I hate to do this, and I'm sure no one is going to like it, but or few people will like it. But let me see if I can give a DC jury some credit. Again, these are many of them, as we know, Clinton donors. There was the woman whose daughter is on the same crew team as Michael Sussman's daughter. So it was clearly a biased jury, but also many of them, presumably, are Washington insiders. And I'm wondering if the story that Durham told was facially implausible to them. That if they, for instance, that they knew there was no way that that's how a bureaucracy operates, that absolutely Michael Sussman was working with these FBI guys, and this whole case seems like a little bit of a put-up. So is that possible as well, or do you just think that the DC jury was going to let him go no matter what because of their pro-Democratic Party bias?
I think no matter what. And to be fair, that's not what I thought 2 or 3 weeks ago. I guess I still held on, for some reason, to this belief that you could find 12 fair-minded people, or perhaps that at least a few of those people would be fair-minded enough to get to a hung jury point.
Right.
But no, I mean, given what we saw, given how quickly the verdict came down, given what the one juror said afterwards, Durham could have done anything. He could have done everything perfectly. He could have had additional evidence. He could have had whatever. There's just no way these people were going to convict. And that, of course, then brings up a much bigger problem in terms of, well, all the crimes take place, all the government-related crimes take place in D.C., but you're now in a situation where only half the people get a free pass for life, and the other half, look at what happened with Peter Navarro the other day, getting arrested and so on. Is he going to get the same kind of treatment from the jury? Of course not. It's going to be the exact opposite. So in terms of Durham's narrative, I mean, I still think that was a strategic blunder. And I mean, that was the overarching trial strategy to somehow paint the FBI as sort of above board. And I think that was just a mistake. Even if he'd lost anyway, let's just assume he was just going to lose anyway. Right. In terms of how this comes across, not only to people like us, but also in terms of future cases, in terms of how the whole of Russiagate is presented. After all, this is the guy who, I'm not sure he knows more than anyone else, but he certainly got more documents than anyone else in the whole world on this.
Yeah.
If this guy comes out on day one and says, oh, our FBI and they were duped. Okay, he didn't use the word dupe, but that was sort of the overall trial strategy, the trial narrative.
Right. Oh, no, I think that was the case. Wasn't the opening statement something like, I don't know about your feelings about Trump or Clinton or whatever, but we can all agree it's bad to lie to the FBI, to lie to our FBI, right?
That is exactly
what the phrase was, our FBI. I'm like, oh boy, right.
That is exactly what they said. Now, I use the word duped. I don't think that they used the word duped, but in essence, that's what they were saying. And I think that was a huge blunder, not only for the case, and as I said, they probably would have lost it anyway, but just in terms of confidence that we have in what Durham is doing. Now, Barr tried to clean it up when he went on Fox News, I think the following day after the verdict. But he did a very poor job of cleaning it up, which was very unusual for Barr, because he's usually very, very good with these kinds of building arguments and so on. He said that the trial strategy was that the FBI, he treated the FBI as neutral. I don't agree with that, but even if that's what Barr said, okay. So even if we take that to be Barr's opinion, well, it's not true, because the FBI was not neutral. It was. So let's say they were not duped, or you're not going to make that argument. Let's say you're not. Let's say you're going to make the argument that, let's just say they're neutral. Well, they weren't. They were going after Trump, and some of the evidence. I mean, not some. I mean, most of the evidence that came out of the trial. I mean, this is the really interesting part. Showed how absolutely blatantly they were going after Trump. The FBI was. Yeah. So just from, I mean, we can talk about that obviously in a moment, because that's kind of takeaway. But just from a lawyerly point of view, you cannot go into a trial either saying that the FBI was duped, or, as Barr now claims, that the FBI was neutral, because it was neither.
Right.
They were 100% trying to get Hillary elected. So what you do is you have to get ahead of the story. So on day one, you're Durham, you go up there and say, look, we have a case here of both sides are bad. Both sides did terrible things. Both sides colluded with each other, but you're going to have to look at only the one side. We're going to have to deal with the other side in another trial at another date. But now we're looking at Sussman. So that would have been the way to frame it. But that all said, again, I think with this jury, Durham would have lost no matter what he did.
Right. Fool, do you agree with that was a strategic error?
Well, I think to actually make the case, you have to say that the FBI's make the case that the FBI is neutral, or the case is done. But like going back to where you're asking if the case should have been brought 100%, because once Sussman lied, or Sussman actually told the truth to Hipsey, and then they came back and Durham was probably researching and saw Priestap and Trisha Anderson's notes, and they saw that there was no client. So they immediately had to say, why is there a discrepancy here? Why is there this lie here? And eventually we figured out, obviously, he was hiding this entire clientele, which we
Right.
can find out the whole Jaffe side and stuff like that. But I mean, to actually present a case, you have to say, that the FBI is at least neutral to even make a case, or it's over.
Right.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
imagine. I mean, and I'm
But I
sorry. What were you
agree.
gonna say? Cool.
But Lee, I agree with Hans that it wasn't
Yeah.
neutral. There's no way it was neutral. They're out
Right.
to get him. They hid the entire. I mean, you look at the EC for this case, for the Alpha case, and it says the Justice Department brought
Right.
information from an anonymous reporter to start it. It was an absolute joke from the seventh floor. But I agree with Hans on that part, that the FBI was completely corrupt in this situation, and the
Right.
jury might have saw that, but but obviously a DC jury, so this gave them a lot of outs to say that he was not guilty. There's so many outs they could take for reasonable doubt wise that's why
Hmm.
they could do that.
I imagine that Durham and his team, I mean, they're all bureaucrats and they're DOJ. I imagine that they knew there was no way that Sussman and the FBI would leave evidence that he was working for Clinton, and that they would in fact try to hide that fact in the event they ever wound up getting caught. And I imagine that that's what pushed Durham forward. Is like, I bet there's documentation on this. Let's look for it. But then, of course, part of the documentation they didn't get until much later, until they got it from Baker's cell phone. Is Baker potentially in any trouble, guys? What do you think? I mean, and forthcoming, perhaps forthcoming indictments or trials. What do you think?
No, and he wouldn't have testified. He wouldn't have agreed to be a witness if there was any chance of that. Yeah, of course, Baker, played dumb. So
Right.
he talked to Durham, and he came and whatever, and I guess he had to admit that Sussman tried to lie about his connections. Which, by the way, I think this is really important to note, that even if they all knew what the real deal was, and even if everyone in DC knew that Sussman is a Hillary lawyer, it's still a lie. Legally.
Right. No, right.
Right. I don't think that Durham's team made that clear enough either.
Materiality-wise, whatever had happened, it was definitely a lie.
Yeah, right. Danchenko is in Virginia, no? Eastern District?
Yeah, that's all going to be a lot easier for Durham. Everything is in reverse with Danchenko. So first of all, he's got him in Virginia, not in DC, and that's where he charged him. So he's going to have a very different jury.
Right.
Second of all, he charged him with a bunch of lies, not just the one. So every time you charge someone with a bunch of lies, you kind of give the jury a choice of, well, we'll give him some, we won't give him some others. You just sort of.
Right.
I think he'll be found guilty in all, but at least you have that. If Sussman had been charged with 10 different lies, you might have had a chance that some of them would have come back as guilty. And then thirdly, he's a Russian guy. He's not a DC lawyer. He's not a light or whatever.
Right. No, it is kind of funny the way that the Democrats have whooped up for the last 6 years all this anti-Russia animus, and now here's a Russian guy showing up in front of a jury, and I'm sure there will be Democrats on there, but even the Republicans on there, he's going to have a harder go of it.
I think he's going to cut a deal. I can't imagine he doesn't. It's just he cannot win. I mean, there's just pretty much no way he can win. And his what he said was recorded. That's the fourth difference. There's probably a few more differences. Just off the top of my head, these are the kind of four big differences. So as Fool said earlier, with Sussman, we didn't have the recording. We did, however, have the text message, and this is where we can come back to Baker. So no, Baker's not going to be charged with anything, but Baker was very sneaky. So he sort of, in piecemeal, admitted to Durham that there was something going on there, but then he withheld the proof, which was the text message.
Yeah.
And then he only coughed up the text message in March of this year, like shortly before trial. Like, oh, by the way, there's also this, and this happens to be absolute proof that Sussman lied. And then the judge said, no, you can't admit that. So the jury never got to, never got to judge him on the September 18th text message, where he clearly says, in as many words, "I'm coming as a good Samaritan. I'm not coming on behalf of any client." So, the judge helped him out there. But of course, Baker is the one who helped Sussman out the most, because he made sure that it was past the statute of limitations when he finally coughed up the text message, so it couldn't be charged anymore.
So why can't Durham turn on him and say, you withheld this significant piece of evidence, we lost the case, you're no longer protected, now I'm coming after you?
Because he'll say what all these FBI people say, which is, "Oh, we got duped, or we're just bad at this. We're just bad at this. We forgot, we."
Right. We're not crooked. We're incompetent. What are you going to do? As you yourself put it so elegantly, it's our FBI. What are you going to do? You're going to put all of us in jail. We're just incompetent.
I think it's like even easier. I think like that eventually when Durham showed the notes of Priestap and Tristan Anderson to James Baker, he immediately said, "Oh yeah, now I remember that Sussman came and lied to me." They put him in a grand jury. He said that, and they didn't look any further. They imagine this lawyer put a lie in writing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't want to actually like defend Durham. Like, it's stupid. They should have like looked into every single text he had on that day. Like, that's dumb.
Right.
It should have been like, "Baker, come and bring us all the texts surrounding this area."
Yeah.
But I envision it happening once they said like, "What happened here?" And Baker went and said, "Oh yeah, now I remember. My memory's refreshed. Oh yeah, Sussman told me once he got in there that he told me I'm not representing any client here, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "All right, go and say it to the grand jury." They did it, and then they didn't look any further. And then when this text popped out, he shoved it in their face, and they're like, "Oh, that." Immediately when that happened, like, I was thinking like that, oh, this could, like, that text on itself, if he wouldn't have gone to the FBI, that's not a material lie, but he did. But once, like, I heard on the case, they're like, it has to be on September 19th that he told James Baker that I lied. And I was like, this case is over. You can't convict him now. That's in my eyes. Once I heard that, I'm like, so it's all up to James Baker's word. I don't think this jury can do it.
Which goes to the lack of aggressiveness on Durham's part. That's probably the biggest criticism. I have a feeling he approached this as a sort of with the old paradigm in mind, like, essentially we're all good people and we disagree about a few things and there's a few bad apples and we're just kind of going to churn along and figure things out. And of course, in the meantime, things are very, very different on the ground, and you just have to be extremely aggressive. I mean, just if Durham had just done 10% of what Mueller did and his crew did, he'd be a lot further, and he would have found out a lot more. What would Mueller have done? He would have kind of sent someone over to Sussman like a year or two ago and said, "Hey, Sussman, we're looking into what you told Baker. Just wanted to ask you about that." And Sussman goes, "Oh, whatever." And then you start monitoring Sussman. You monitor his conversations, his emails, his everything. And you're very quickly that's what they did to Papadopoulos on the Mueller side, right? And not that Papadopoulos did anything bad or whatever, but then they built up all this innuendo about what he did, and he threw away his phone, and he did all these kinds of things because they were observing him after they kind of flagged it up with him. So that's kind of aggressive tactics. And of course, Durham hasn't done anything like that. And it's not that I'm speculating that he hasn't done anything he just hasn't. I mean, he didn't even subpoena all these Fusion documents. There's like 1,600 emails that Fusion claims are privileged. Of course, they're not privileged. Fusion is not a lawyer. They just said privilege. And even this Obama judge agreed that most of these emails are not privileged. They just kind of, it's just fake privilege for the sake of trying to hide this stuff. And Durham didn't sue for that. He didn't try and get those documents. And then he tried right before the trial, and then the judge told him, well, it's too late because it would be unfair on Sussman if we release all that stuff now. So what do you call that? I mean, it's an error. It's a blunder, but I think it's also because of lack of aggressiveness. He just didn't. I don't think he understands the sort of that, again, as I said at the outset, the paradigm has shifted. Things are different now. You got to fight fire with fire, and he's just not doing that.
Well, look, I mean, what if anything has Durham learned from this trial, and what have we learned about Durham? There's lots of people out there. I'm sure there's lots of people listening to us right now who are saying, you guys are pretending that John Durham is really looking to convict these people. They're not. He's there. He's a fixer. Like Barr was a fixer. Like Horowitz is a fixer. Durham's just another fixer. And I mean, there's a case to be made. So what do we think now? Hans, you're describing something that looks that looks might be bigger than an error. We all know that fusion is in the center of this. So why didn't he go for these documents earlier? Is it a lack of aggression, or or is he a fixer? This is for both. A question for both you guys. What have we learned? What has Durham learned during the trial, and what have we learned about Durham?
We can't read his mind. I mean, everything I just said about that, which goes to the fact that he did blunder. And I think it is a genuine blunder and lack of aggressiveness because of just an old mindset. Hasn't arrived in this sort of Obama lawfare kind of world yet. That to me is the takeaway here. I don't think it was kind of done on purpose as kind of the fixer, because I mean, number one, it's extremely embarrassing what just happened to like a lifelong prosecutor of that stature like Durham to bring a bread and butter 1001 lying to the FBI case and lose it within 2 hours with the jury is extremely embarrassing. So, I mean, just for that reason alone, and of course, long-standing integrity, all these other things, I don't think he's a fixer. I just think he messed it up because he spent the first year chasing shadows or, on a wild goose chase with all this Papadopoulos crap. When he went to Italy and chased us Mifsud and all this stuff,
that's what's been reported, and I think one thing we've all learned over the last 5 years is maybe that happened and maybe it didn't, the way it was reported in the Times and the rest of the press.
That's true, but Barr in his book admits to the fact that he wasted a whole bunch of something like a year on these issues. So again, I'm not saying that's bad or whatever, and it's certainly not done on purpose. But it just, to me, all of the evidence points to Durham just kind of still living in the old paradigm, whereas the Democrats, for sure, are living a life of lawfare, and that's not what the other side is doing.
Yeah, Fool.
I would tackle it differently. I mean, I would agree with Hans. Like the old paradigm, Durham is actually fair. Mm-hmm. He actually understands justice. Where it's
that's generous and a nice way to put it.
Yeah, he's fair. So I mean, he could have gone and done the Roger Stone raids and whatnot, but he could have taken he took Baker's word for it or whatever. He could have gotten his phones and whatever, but he's fair, and I think that's how justice should actually happen. But if you're in DC, that's not how it works anymore, but I feel like that's how it should work. So, and he gave all, I guess, benefit of the doubt to attorney-client privilege and everything like that. There needs to be more Durham prosecutors, that's for sure, than Mueller's. Or at least Weissman. Mueller was a figurehead, at least Weissman's. That's how I would put it.
Right. I agree with that. I think Fool is exactly right. Durham is fair, and he tries to do things the way we all learned them in law school, and doing it properly. So, for instance, as a little data point here, the judge asked Durham, like, why the hell didn't you ask for these privileged documents like last year? What took you so long? And he said, I mean, it's in the documents. I believe him. There's no reason not to believe him. He says that, we were still negotiating with the other side in good faith, and we were hoping to work something out. Well, again, that's this whole lawfare issue. You cannot talk to Mark Elias and expect anything to happen in good faith. That just doesn't happen in this world anymore. So, no, I completely agree with Fool. He was trying to be fair, but unfortunately, that those are no longer the rules.
What's your assessment? It seems like both. I mean, I know concern about Judge Cooper going into the case. What's your assessment of his job, Hans and Fool?
I think at first he's a sneaky guy. he he spent the first 6 months being pretty even-handed. I mean, everything was like he gave Durham a few wins, he gave Sussman a few wins. It was just the usual sort of thing. And then it was sort of just as we came into the trial that a week ahead of the trial or so, he really started to kind of put his thumb on the scale, and suddenly everything went Sussman's way. And then, of course, the one we all heard about, I mean, there's a lot of legal, technical stuff in the background, but the one we all heard about is these jurors that you already mentioned. You know, the mother the mother whose daughter is in the same class or in the same rowing group as Sussman.
Yeah, same, rowing crew team, I guess. Yeah, right.
And so, he put his thumbs on the scale and expected. He's an Obama judge. But I think my takeaway on that one, surprisingly in a way, is he could have been the biggest pro-Trump judge in the world, and it still wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah. Fool, what do you think?
No, I agree with that. I think he did a good job up until the end. I don't know about, I mean, like I never went to law school or anything like that, but like the privilege, like if Laura Seago, somebody who's not a client or any, and Joffe's emailing Laura Seago and all this stuff, and Sussman's not even on it, I figure that that's not attorney-client privilege, but I can't weigh on that because I don't have the law chops that I would need probably, but it didn't look like that's attorney-client privilege to me because there's no attorney involved, and I don't see Fusion GPS preparing any type of work that's going into legal operations. So
right. Can we talk about what's Rodney Joffe's future? And I want to use that also to segue into what we found. Apparently, it was an FBI whistleblower who passed this information to Representatives Gates and Jordan about the FBI workspace at Perkins Coie. But first, let's talk about Rodney Joffe, because I think the FBI's explanation sounds an awful like what Joffe was doing at New Star, right, which was processing these requests on behalf of intelligence services going to providers. So, what's going to happen with Rodney Joffe?
I'll go first, I guess. I feel like Rodney Joffe is in a lot of legal trouble. There's no way he's getting out of this. You watched the trial, like the entire thing was obviously a conspiracy to just give this information to the FBI, and then he snuck around and he gave his information to his not handler. What's his name? Forget his name.
It was whoever it was in Chicago, right?
Yeah, but
anyways, I don't know. It was Heidi who he passed it on to, or someone?
No, it was the guy in the NCFTA. I forget his name.
No,
it's not Hellman. It's not Gaynor. It's the other guy. But anyways, he was clearly running Sussman into the FBI just to get an investigation going, and then he was coming back around and throwing it to his handler and stuff like that. And then clearly he was obviously using all this. He was telling all his companies to go and look at anything Trump related. And like I put a tweet out the other day about they were even searching like Trump domains associated with with Barron Trump, with Jared Kushner's daughter. It's just ridiculous.
Wow, right.
But it's clearly illegal that this was a fraud on the FBI, which I don't even go if you can do that because the FBI is a fraud, obviously now. What we learned from all these texts, but then after the election, after Trump's in, he started running it through the Senate. All this, we already know that the data was turned down by the FBI like in January, and it was probably fraudulent anyways. But Joffe just kept on going. I have no idea why, but he was probably committing crime. He was probably defrauding the Congress. We talk about Navarro obstructing Congress. Joffe was doing it into 2017, and I'm not afraid of saying that, even though he put me in whatever court filing he was doing. Like, he was clearly using his power to collect all this data that he had and all these shell companies of Packet Forensics and Bitbuoyant and all this other stuff. And his understudy at Bitbuoyant, Jared Novick, was saying, like, this is clearly political. So, I think he has some contractual issues to look into. But he was clearly it's obvious he was sending Sussman to do this, and then it's like Steele again. There was circular reporting and
right.
Complete
it's amazing how they replicated the same sort of thing, right? Rodney Joffe is the is in many ways the steel of the Alpha Bank branch of the Russiagate operation.
Oh, he absolutely is. So I think Joffe is a good.
Hans, just 1 second. I've got a message here that's hard for some people to hear. Fool, can you hear him? Okay, I can hear him fine. I just want to make sure that we can all hear Fool, because then maybe it's whoever is listening and can't hear him. Maybe they need to turn up the volume. Hans, can you hear Fool okay too?
No, he's a bit muffled. He should probably turn up the volume.
Okay, thanks. Yep. Okay. Now other people are saying,
I'm not even
Fool,
sure how to do that. I don't think I can do anything about it.
can you turn up the volume on your phone?
No, I don't think I have like a microphone volume.
Jan is our friend Jan is saying you have to yell now. But let's let Hans. Let's go back to Hans, and then when you come back again, we're gonna ask you to scream.
Yeah. Joffe is the litmus test. If Joffe is in charge, then we know that Durham is fake, is a fixer, whatever you want to call it, because 100%. Because of what Joffe did is so much, maybe not worse, but certainly so much more obvious in terms of being chargeable than what anyone else did. But he did those things last year, which was the 5-year time limit. Durham had all the information, everything I'm going to say now. Durham knew a year ago, so he didn't charge him. So he let the time limit, statute of limitations lapse. So why did he do that? So again, that's why it's the litmus test as to whether he's going to charge Joffe with something far more serious, or whether he's just going to make it all go away. So the two things he could have charged Joffe with very, very easily is lying to the FBI and concealing things from the FBI in respect of what Fool was just talking about. So what Joffe did is, it's really, really, really bad. After Sussman went into Baker and said, I'm just here on my own and here's the stuff, Joffe went into another FBI guy a couple of weeks later, a guy called Tom Grasso. And gave Grasso the same stuff, but pretended he was just like just from a different stream, had nothing to do with Clinton, nothing to do with Sussman, nothing to do with anything. Just like, oh, by the way, I found this here. And he also misled Grasso and the FBI. So that's the first lie, that he concealed his connections to Clinton. And then the second lie is that he misrepresented where he got the stuff from. It's a bit vague still where exactly he got it from, or what he said where he got it from. I mean, initially it was reported that he got it from a reporter, but it may have just been that someone reported it to him. But in any case, he didn't say that, hey, I got this from my own tech guys whom I asked to get it for me. He made it look as if this was just sort of given to him. And it's just so blatant what he did there. And by the way, lying to the FBI under this 1001 law that we keep hearing about, lying incorporates concealing, same thing. So if you conceal something of importance that is materially relevant, that's exactly the same as if you say something actively that's a lie. So legally that makes no difference. So anyway, he did those things, and that's incontrovertible, and he wasn't charged, and Durham just let it lapse. So let's see what happens. But yeah, I'd be absolutely astonished if that guy isn't charged with something pretty serious.
I'm astonished that, well, of course I shouldn't be, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but that the FBI didn't get rid of him until 2021. Is that correct?
That's correct. Is my microphone better? Can I get a thumb up? Is that better?
A little. Has a half thumb up. A little bit. Hans, can you hear him a little better?
No.
Sorry.
I just turned up my volume, so that helps on my end.
Okay. Fool. What were you saying now? Fool.
My problem is, when did they discover that Joffe was actually putting all this data into the FBI? I mean, or was responsible for this alpha stuff. I don't know when they actually figured that out. So yeah, he definitely should have been ditched a long time ago whenever they found it, but I don't know when the heck they did.
Right.
But there's no way he shouldn't have been gone back then, even when Grasso, like once Grasso realized that, he's kind of the source of this, even though he said it was an anonymous reporting. I don't know, it's so corrupt, like that. who knows? I mean,
I mean,
Danchenko was used like, I mean, he was still used in like their the brief to like the Sissy, like when Priestap briefed Sissy, and they still said he was a credible source. So I'm not surprised that they said he was
right.
credible.
I mean, this guy is talking to the press through, when was that last New Yorker story? 2020. And remember, Steele gets canned, what is it, November 1st, 2016, because they finally figured out he's the guy who was talking to David Corns. They, oh, you got to go, right? Because it was too obvious. But here's Jaffe, who's around to 2021, even though he's the guy that's feeding everyone from Slate to the New Yorker, and I'm sure there were other pieces I'm forgetting now. I know there were 2 New Yorker pieces on the Alpha Bank nonsense. It's not incomprehensible. It's just more of what we should no longer be surprised by. And yet, I have to say, I was surprised by the revelation that the FBI had a workstation at Perkins Coie. Guys, does their rationalization, or rather their explanation for this, make sense to you, Hans Fool?
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those where it sounds extraordinarily weird, but then I read that it does happen from time to time. That's one of those where we just need to find out more. That I don't want to prejudge it. How common is it? What was Sussman's involvement? Many questions. The problem is, no one follows up on these things.
Right.
I guess it could be innocent. That doesn't look like it to me, but maybe it's just we don't know enough. But the media isn't doing its job, and we don't know.
I can't imagine it's innocent for this simple reason that once they found out that Perkins Coie was also representing the DNC, and they've got a case, investigating the other campaign. I mean, the whole thing just seems preposterous. Fool?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised by it. It seems a little bit ridiculous. Very ridiculous once they figured out Sussman was doing all this stuff. But like if you look at like all the exhibits, it's like Adrian Hawkins was emailing Sussman basically every day. So I'm not surprised that he was like the administrator of this or whatever, and they were taking him credibly. But to put one of these in a law firm that, maybe it's supposed to be defensive, it seems like a little. Why can't you just walk across the street to go to the FBI to go to SCIF, honestly? But it's like
right.
They put like a SCIF in like Trump Tower, I think, or whatever, which makes sense because he's a candidate and whatever. But to put it in a law firm, why can't can a defense lawyer sneak in there and see what's going on with the government? I'm not a lawyer or anything, but it seems absolutely ridiculous. Like, why? How lazy are these guys? They can't take a taxi. We know Sussman took one taxi at least. Why can't he get a taxi over to the DOJ's SCIF?
Right.
$28 for it or whatever, and charge it to the law firm. I have no idea.
Charge it to Hillary.
Yeah, charge it to Hillary.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Hillary. I feel like once I figured out that if they had a SCIF in Perkins Coie, it seems like it would probably be a lie. It would probably be a 1001 charge to lie to Sussman. So the FBI's were probably on pins and needles with that one.
Right. Yeah. Right. So what about the stuff that we learned during the trial about the FBI, which again should look, because I think the general assessment, certainly the mainstream mainstream consensus of people who have been following the story is that well, okay, he didn't get a conviction. No one really expected a conviction. It's a DC jury, but we learned lots of great information. How much should we be satisfied with learning lots of great, important information?
Not at all.
Okay. Agreed. Yeah.
This stuff, everything we found out is emails and notes and things like that from 2016, early 2017. So it's basically the entirety of the Trump presidency. So why the hell didn't he release it? And you'll all recall he did. In September of 2018, he signed this order that he was just going to release everything. and he tweeted it out. And then he walked it back like 2 days later because some IC people got to him and told him, don't do that or you can't. And then he came up with some stupid excuse that it would upset allies or whatever. And he walked it back.
It was Rod Rosenstein, and that was the excuse they used all along, right? Oh, it's going to upset allies.
So Trump got totally
allies until
right. So Trump got totally bamboozled by these people, and it's very, very bad because we could have had all that information back then and earlier if he'd done something about it earlier. Now imagine that's 4 years ago. All these statute of limitations issues we just talked about wouldn't have been a problem if we had. See, this is people always say, "Oh, you can't release it because then you give up on the criminal track." That's rubbish. You release it. You crowdsource it. I mean, whether Durham looks at it or whether we all look at it, what's the difference in terms of criminal track? Nothing at all.
Right.
All that might be a difference is that Sussman might know that we know. Okay.
Right.
But that doesn't make him less guilty or anyone else less guilty. So, no, it's a huge shame that wasn't released. And to now release it after all the statute of limitations have lapsed, what good is that? Plus, it's highly embarrassing for Durham. Durham gets a lot of pressure now from DOJ, from Biden, from all these people to Lisa Monaco and whatever to shut it down. He now has to be super careful with what he does. He was already super careful. He never raided anyone, never did anything. Now he's never going to do any of that. So no, I think it's just bad in every single way because we got the stuff, but we could have had the stuff anyway. So I don't really think that's a good second prize.
Yeah, I mean, I feel to a certain extent, I feel the more information that comes out, especially since, look, we've known the essential contours of this since 2017, or maybe a little bit later, maybe the Nunes memo. But in a sense, I feel like the more information that comes out without convictions, it's beginning to feel like rubbing salt in the wound. Fool?
I agree. Well, I mean, going back to Rosenstein, I guarantee he didn't see any of this crap. He saw probably whatever foreign intelligence stuff, and he said, like, "Oh, we can't release this." But I guarantee he didn't dig hard and with McCabe and Ray to see. I mean, I guarantee they weren't even looking at Gaynor's and Hellman's text messages. Like the Hellman text messages to Batty, like they're just laughing off. Like, how could this be a communication channel when Trump's like name is in the domain? And it's just absolutely preposterous that the seventh floor is all giddy about this and like, oh, but we can't share actually any of the information of how this case came about with Chicago field office, which is an absolute disaster, and it shows up when the EC again. When I was talking about, they lied. I mean, they basically. I don't know who told it. It had to come from somewhere. They didn't just say like, oh, this is where we thought it came from. That the DOJ took this information from an anonymous reporter and gave it to the FBI. Like I said before, like was the Department of Justice Sussman's CHS code name? Because that's the only way it would ever make sense. That's the only way it would ever make sense. Such a disaster. And I guarantee Rod Rosenstein wasn't digging hard at all into this. He thought that, the reputation of the FBI, they're all good guys. No, I mean, Rod did basically nothing. He just sat there and let Guahar basically run Mueller. He didn't do anything with Mueller. He just thought that the DOJ was untouchable because he was sitting in the U.S. Attorney's office for 12 years, smelling his own farts, basically.
Right. That was the job, just to protect the DOJ, just get in and protect it. Right. I think you might be right. I think you might not have seen a single thing, including foreign intelligence, if there was any foreign intelligence. And I don't know whether that is likely or not. But yeah, the job was to defend the DOJ, and the job is to defend the FBI.
Well, one of the little tidbits that came out of the trial in terms of all these exhibits is an FBI document that puts a strict embargo on their reasoning for Jeff Sessions to recuse. So the FBI supplied some kind of reason. And obviously it's a fake reason because by the time he recused on March 2nd, 2017, both sides of the investigation had collapsed because you had Danchenko disavowing the dossier. So dossier is gone. Mm-hmm. And Alpha was dismissed within a few hours as a joke, as we found out. But officially it was closed in January. So anyway, both investigations are done. It's over.
Right.
So whatever they told Sessions to recuse was a big fat lie. And then they put an embargo on the lie, and that's like in the documents, like no one's allowed to talk about our reasons why, whatever we told him. And so I completely agree with you guys that no one asked questions. Rosenstein's like, yeah, whatever. Sessions recuse, okay, fine. So that's a big part of the problem. And I think it's a combination of kind of trusting, it's the FBI, we should trust them, as well as covering for them. It's difficult to draw a line, but I don't really think it matters. Why should we even draw a line? I think one is as bad as the other. None of these people were doing their jobs or worse.
Right. Sessions thing. Do we know the exact date that McCabe investigation on Sessions? I laugh because it's so preposterous. So why not laugh? Do we know the date on that?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know if we've seen an EC about that yet, but
yeah,
it probably came pretty quickly after the supposed lie.
Right. I would imagine that that's part of the rationale they used to get Sessions to recuse himself. I mean, I don't know how they would have phrased that, but I would imagine that was part of it. Well, look, going into Danchenko, Hans, you're optimistic. Look, I don't think that a Virginia jury is going to be as bad as a DC jury, but over the last 20 years, as we know, the composition of the state of Virginia, once solidly red, is no longer. We've seen what's happened in Loudoun County in the school district, sort of the unofficial capital of critical race theory. So I think it's going to be better than a DC jury, but I don't know how optimistic I am with the jury and the way you guys have been talking about the way Durham handled this case. So is there reason for optimism, or are we going to be watching this on the edge of our seats?
Yeah, even if he brings the same kind of talent to the courtroom, which I understand, I don't know the people there, but from what I understand is none of the people who represented Durham's team during Sussman's trial actually practice in that court, which is a really, really bad thing.
Wow.
So what I'm going to say is, even if he does that again, assuming that's true, in the court in Virginia, he's still going to win, because it's not only all the things we just discussed. There's also the fact that on the Danchenko narrative, everyone agrees, Durham and the establishment and the sort of Lindsey Graham types and DOJ, and everyone agrees this is the bad Russian guy who lied and caused all these problems. Everyone can sort of blame him. I mean, in a way, you almost feel sorry for him, but I don't. He needs to come clean if he wants people to feel sorry for him, and he still hasn't done that. But I just don't see him wiggling out of this. What is he? He's been tape recorded with a lie. It's a lie. We know it's a lie for various reasons. He lied about meeting some guy and talking to some guy that he'd never met in his life, Sergei Milian. It's on tape. He's in Northern Virginia. He's a Russian national. It's just every single box that you tick there is a bad box for him. So I'm very, very optimistic on that one. But when I say optimistic, it would be not good if the guy's convicted, as I think he will be, unless he makes a deal. But then everyone comes away thinking, and by the way, Bill Barr was pushing this point on Fox News again, like 2 nights ago. Again, like, you might have been a Russian spy. We were all duped by a Russian spy. So, that's their narrative. And if the result of the Danchenko trial is that sort of the accepted narrative that, everyone got duped by this evil Russian, well, then that's very, very bad, because we know that the biggest evildoers in this whole mess was the FBI.
Right. Okay. So then, what does victory look like with Danchenko, fool? If it's not just putting him away, was it 4 charges or 5 charges of lying to the FBI? If it's not just that, what does he have to talk about? Yeah. What does victory look like here?
Well, I feel like that Danchenko has to flip upwards, or there's no victory. I feel like he has to put Steele, Simpson all in the box, because what we saw from the Sussman case is we got so much information surrounding what was happening. There needs to be emails and for his discovery or whatever. I know they're talking about classified stuff, but we need to. Well, these 2 cases basically intersect, but we need to see more Glenn Simpson, more Steele, and they need to flip upwards because this is a conspiracy. There's no doubt that
Right.
some of these guys probably were telling, hey, Danchenko, just say this. We know Simpson was basically saying, like, hey, can you look to Steele, like, hey, look into this alpha crap or whatever. And then Steele said, hey, Danchenko, look at that. And then we don't know where the information came from because we know it didn't come from any legitimate source. It was all made up. But that's where I think the win has to come from if there's a conspiracy again.
Right.
But
and what if he just shuts up and his lawyer says
that's what his
lawyer says
actually. I'm afraid.
Right.
That's what I'm sort of afraid of. If Danchenko just says, "I'll eat these charges," and we never see like the information that we got from the suspect
right.
trial.
Same here. If his lawyer says, "Hey, eat it," you're going to be you're going away for I don't know, maybe a year, but don't worry, Joe Biden. You're gonna have a you got the midterms next month, but don't worry, within the year you're fine. You'll be out. Yeah. Keep your nose clean, keep your head down. We'll look in on you, and you'll be out in a year.
The problem with Igor is, does he want to go back to Russia? Because I would think they would have to deport him or something with that. So there's a little bit of something that he can say, hey, why don't I flip up? But going with Hans is, I mean, he's definitely going to get charged with something. The Dolan lies, I mean, he was definitely on tape,
right,
lying. Dolan can basically be a witness saying he definitely lied about where this information came from, because Dolan obviously told it to him. But I'm just making a plea out here about the Sergey stuff. Sergey, if you're listening, I think you were. You need to get in that jury box. Because you're the key witness. You're one of the key witnesses, and this is for you, man. This is for you to get your reputation back, because they made you flee the country. They said you were a Russian spy, SVR agent. I think this is your
God. That'd be beautiful.
If you can talk to Durham and get in that jury box and just shit on Danchenko from a very high altitude, that would be worth it for me.
That'd be beautiful.
Or whatever. But I think you were listening in here, but that's my call to Sergey, at least.
That's actually a beautiful idea. Hans?
As much as I would, love for Sergey to come forward and tell his story, especially in that kind of forum, technically Durham doesn't need it. I mean, he can prove that they didn't meet, they didn't talk. I mean, you got the record; it's all there. In terms of what your question as to what
I was just playing devil's advocate.
I know. It's just I don't.
No, it's a nice image. It's a triumphant. Actually, I like it. That's very nice.
No, exactly, because I'm going to come to Iggy's trial, and I want to see Sergey just bury him.
I would hate to put pressure on the guy, because he's been put through hell by these people, and no one has paid for it, and no one has paid for that, and that's right. And that starts with the media. I mean, the FBI terrible, Clinton people terrible, Fusion people terrible, but the media the worst. Right. And some of these people haven't even retracted their stories. Imagine he wasn't even on the Trump team like Papadopoulos or whatever. He was just a supporter. That's it. His only crime was that he had once sold Trump condominiums in Florida in like 2007 or 2008. That was his crime. So there was a photo of him and Trump. Look, if I'm a realtor and I sell Trump apartments, I got a photo with Trump. Of course, I'm going to put it on my webpage.
Absolutely.
That's normal.
Right.
So he just did absolutely normal stuff. I mean, he came to this country because, he was kind of getting out of communism and all that. And then he's greeted with that, right? I mean, he had a good run, and then he's greeted with that. So imagine you're in that situation. You're not on the Trump team. You got nothing to do with that other than being, a supporter and having sold his apartments once. And you're framed because of that photo.
Right.
And then suddenly you see your name in the newspaper every day, just telling these lies, and you don't even know what's going on, because you don't even know there is a dossier, but you're constantly in the newspaper as some source for some really bad stuff and like an insider and blah, blah, blah. And you just don't know what's going on. You got these people following you around, and they just put him through hell, and, they made him lose everything, and no one's paid any price for that. So if there's
you're absolutely right.
If there's any kind of comeuppance, I really would love something to, Danchenko very much so, because Danchenko put Sergey in a lot of trouble with his lies. But of course, Steele and everyone else as well.
Right.
If one day that would be nice if something good happened there. And it doesn't. I don't think it necessitates him coming and testifying. It would be great if he did. If he didn't, I don't think it will change the outcome of the case. In terms of what will happen with Danchenko, I completely agree with Fool. The best outcome is if Danchenko comes clean and just says, okay, here's everything I know. Here's what Steele told me to say. Here's what really happened. Here's what Dolan told me to say. Just come clean. And that would probably be best for him as well. Is he going to do it or not? I mean, Durham doesn't have a good track record of kind of pressuring people or persuading people to do that, because look at what happened with Kleinsmith. He could have turned the screws on Kleinsmith, and he didn't. He undercharged him. He left out the biggest charge, the biggest lie that Kleinsmith told, which is that Danchenko was based in Russia, which is a total lie. And he told that to the FISA court. He was never charged with that. So, Durham, again, maybe it's that old mentality of like, well, we'll just try and play nice and hope things work out. Well, what worked out is that he got a slap on the wrist, and now he's back practicing law. So if that's sort of what Danchenko's looking at, well, he's not going to cooperate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I imagine he tried to get Sussman to cooperate too, and Sussman read the situation as we are saying, it's a DC jury. Try your best. I'm going to have friends in that room. In fact, I'm going to invite. Everyone in that room I know will have been to a dinner party at my house. So how's that? Go ahead, try me. Do your worst. Well, so where are we left? Are we left still feeling optimistic? Are we left feeling pessimistic going into? Because Danchenko is the next landmark event. As we said, we hope there might be indictments like Rodney Jaffe, but where are we right now? Can you guys and we'll bring it to a close in a sec. But I just want to be able to take our temperature, as it were, get a sense of what we're feeling. So, gentlemen, if you would,
can I go first?
Please.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic because, like we were talking about Sergey, like we haven't seen any details about his case or anything like that. But I imagine the FBI was an absolute shit show, just like they were in this case. So I've said this on a couple other podcasts. Like I remember when the Rodney Jaffe stuff came out, my mind was blown. I'm like, holy crap, there's this other entire thing. So I feel like that's going to be a reckoning for the FBI at some point, that there's this entire thing we don't know about where all these comms are basically knowing that this is garbage. And it probably went on and on, like into Mueller, et cetera. Like I know like the scope of Durham goes into Mueller. I think at some point the FBI is going to get some reckoning. We don't know what it's going to do, but like from the exhibits, the FBI was absolutely corrupt. And that's part of the reason why Durham lost the case. So I mean, I'm optimistic that I think somebody in the FBI will probably catch a reckoning. Like we don't know how many comms they have. Who knows about that? But I'm still optimistic. I mean, full disclosure, I didn't think from the very beginning. I didn't think Sussman was going to get convicted.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's par for the course for me. And especially when I saw how the case went down, where they got kind of screwed with the text message, that I was like, okay, now it's over. But I'm optimistic. I think as long as I would not want to see Igor take a plea. I want him to go to trial, or I mean, unless he's flipping, I would like to see him go to trial. That might be a bad thing if he actually went to trial, because that means he might not be flipping on anybody. But I'm optimistic, especially from what we learned from this entire trial of how much of those comms were going on. And Durham's obviously being very thorough and getting everything, all these comms. I guess except for the
aside from the text from Baker.
Yeah, Baker's text messages and stuff like that. But that could be a fluke just because Baker might have been forthcoming. And I don't know. I'm optimistic, but I guess I always am. I guess they call me the fool.
You're the best, fool. You're great. No, the optimism is important, right? I mean, because it's not just about getting down about this. It's like it's fairly easy to despair. I think we look at this stuff and we realize right, because that's the whole thing about all the information coming out. Oh, we're getting more information. Isn't this great? It's like, no, it's actually making a lot of people despondent, knowing how corrupt the FBI is, knowing about their relationship with the Clinton campaign. It's actually disgusting. It makes people feel very sad and unnerved. So no, the optimism is great. The thing that I like about the Danchenko trial going into it is, I mean, this kind of goes into the stuff that all of us have been looking at very closely for several years, because this takes us right into the FISA stuff. And this is where we got information from, both the Nunes investigation as well as the Horowitz's IG report. So Hans, how do you feel going into Danchenko, or not just Danchenko, but whatever else might be coming up?
Not as optimistic as Fool.
Okay.
Looking at these documents that were released, even though they were plentiful, there was it sort of ends in early 2017, and there's nothing about Mueller. There's nothing about the sort of all these efforts that were undertaken against Trump sort of beyond 2017. So I just don't see that Durham is seriously looking at the FBI. And of course, just recall again that the statute of limitations for federal law is 5 years. So almost everything that was done has lapsed now. And one of the few that's left is is major fraud against the United States. That's 7 years. But that's much, much, much more difficult to prove. So if you were going to charge some FBI guy with lying or whatever, by the way, they told a lot of lies, for instance, to their supervisors at the DOJ, which we also found out through this trial. But all these lies are time barred now because it's more than 5 years. So I'm optimistic about Danchenko in terms of him getting convicted. I'm not optimistic that we'll find out, all that we want to find out. But Joffe, as I said, he's got to be charged. I mean, I absolutely fall my tree if he's not charged, given what we know about him. But other than that, I don't. There's pressure on Durham, and I just see a lot of. I don't look at it as optimistically as Fool does.
Yeah.
But there's a bigger problem, I think, that I'm just can't stop thinking about, which is that as kind of pessimistic as I was about the DC jury pool, I think what's been shown over the past 2 weeks is it's much worse than that. Whatever you thought about it, it's much, much worse than that. And that's a real problem. And again, coming back to Barr, what he told Fox News the other night, he basically said you can't win in the DC jury pool. He said that if your name's not Clinton, you can't win. Words to that effect. That he literally said that. And this is the Attorney General, the one that just stepped down last year or 2 years ago, whenever. So if you got people like him saying it, what hope is there? And of course, this is a problem, as I said at the outset, because anything to do with the federal government has to be charged in that jurisdiction.
Right.
Almost anything, because it all happens there. So you don't have a republic anymore if one side wins all these cases and the other side gets jailed in all these cases. It just doesn't work that way. So to me, if you're going to ask, if sort of we're going to look at the 30,000-foot view here, what's the biggest thing out of all this is you got to fix that court system, the whole jurisdictional issue, federal jurisdictional issue. You have to fix that. You can't fix the jury. I mean, you can't replace everyone in DC or whatever. So, you might randomly sign cases around the country. You can do different things, but you have to do something, because otherwise you're going to lose your country. Because look at McCabe, he did horrible things and he got away with it because he was from the right party. Look at Flynn, look at other people who didn't do horrible things and they got, look at what just happened with poor Peter Navarro, so that to me really is the biggest takeaway. And I say that as someone who was extremely pessimistic about the DC jury coming in. And now it's just much, much worse than that.
Well, I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, that was my entire takeaway, is that if you're a Democrat, you can commit as many crimes as you want in DC, and as long as you're a bigwig D, basically, you can do whatever you want. But I mean, somebody was DMing me earlier, kind of, a little bit completely just awestruck by and pissed off about the hypocrisy, and I'm sort of zen about it, because there's Comey wrote in his book, there's a higher loyalty. They'll get their comeuppance in another life. I guess most people don't think about that, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, they're like, do you think the Democrats will ever get like their comeuppance? I'm like, no, they won't. They control all the wheels of power. It's not going to happen. But you have to think that maybe there's a bigger plan here. So I mean, that's where like eventually I thought this is just a complete karmic journey we're on right now. Because it's so bad like that I'm numb to it. That it's sort of like a karmic journey where I'm like, they're never gonna get theirs. But except when I mean, whatever you believe in, the pearly gates or something like that, they'll get it. Which I mean, like, I believe in reincarnation, which is another thing. But they're gonna not get a good deal, at least. So that's what I think. So like, I mean, I feel like it's just sort of like a joke, but like I see it as sort of a karmic thing. If you do good, then the evil, absolute power corrupts absolutely, I guess, and that's where they're at right now. But
well, I let me see how I can explain what I'm thinking when I look at this. Yeah, Hans and I have talked about this quite a bit. And I find it extremely depressing, and it's bad for the country. But also, I feel in some ways. Look, I mean, I want to be optimistic about the Danchenko trial, and I will be. I'm optimistic that Rodney Jaffe will get charged, and maybe others as well. But I think the larger picture, Fool, what you said is beautiful. And I think the larger picture, though, is not just about the hereafter. I also think it's about, look, things are changing, right? Things are moving around in this country very quickly. And as bad as things are getting, things will get worse. And then I do believe that a new, I don't know how to put it, a sort of new order, a new dispensation will come of this. And these will be data points, and Americans are watching. People are looking at all the different things that have happened, right? Whether it was the COVID lockdowns, whether it's the January 6 trials. I mean, these are all intended to divide the country and put half of it on one side and turn them into enemies. Because this is finally what Russiagate was, right? Describing the president of the United States as disloyal, as a Russian spy, that goes right into January 6th, right? Where, oh no, they're all insurrectionists, they're seditionists. And if you like Donald Trump, if you voted for Donald Trump, you too are disloyal. I think people are watching. I think people are following really closely. Maybe not every bit of Russiagate as closely as we all are here, but I think people are watching as something is deeply corrupt and rotten. And what makes me optimistic is that as bad as things are going to change, and we're relying on ourselves. We're relying on our Americans, our neighbors, our friends and family, our fellow citizens. So that makes me very optimistic. I want to be optimistic about Danchenko, and we'll see. Gentlemen, parting words. Anything else you want to add before we leave this afternoon?
I'll just say that I mean, I feel like I'm speaking for Hans, but like, Hans and I are only here because of this crap. I wouldn't be speaking to you, Lee, right now unless these people started taking this journey against our country, taking it way too far. So that's all I want to say. That I feel like we're optimistic because I mean, look at all the people, just anonymous people, just being patriotic and trying to dig into what's actually happening. So I feel like that's on our
That's
side.
beautiful. I totally agree. You're right. This is a terrible thing that has brought so many people together. We wouldn't know each other. We wouldn't realize like how much we and our neighbors and our fellow citizens, how much love they have for this country and how outraged they are that this country has been degraded.
I completely agree. Really well put, Fool. I've met so many good people, great people, just because of this. So if there hadn't been any FBI shenanigans, if there hadn't been all this spying on Trump and so on, I wouldn't have met all these people. So that's fantastic. And on your wider point, Lee, I don't see it yet with Russiagate because it's not coming through. Media's not reporting it. People aren't really taking it in. I mean, yes, we are, and us here in this group and our viewers and so on. But I think I do agree with you. That's where it's going directionally, because the things that you cannot hide, or everything comes out eventually, right? And what's coming out right now is all these problems that Biden has caused, and he can't hide them. You can, the media won't help him. Nothing will help him. So maybe at some point, and it shows, people understand, and maybe in some ways, sometimes I think it was good that he was elected, because it had to get so bad before people woke up. And maybe something similar is going to happen with Russiagate as well. Certainly, Sussman, as disappointing as it was, what happened there, one thing I've noticed, especially amongst us here, is how it really reinforced this idea of how bad it is. As I said earlier, this DC jury pool issue, of course it was an issue. I've known about that issue for a long time, but it's really reinforced how really, really bad it is, and that something needs to be done about it. So, I do agree with you that eventually, things will right themselves, but I'm not optimistic about the sort of short to medium run.
I think it's not just things righting themselves. I think it's people like you, Hans, and people like Fool, who are helping set them right. So thank you guys so much for coming on today, and bless both of you guys, man, because you actually do both make me very optimistic in different ways. And you're absolutely right. I think it's unlikely any of us would know each other if it weren't for all of this stuff that brought us together. And thanks to all of you who are listening. The same holds for you. We wouldn't all get to have these conversations and have these discussions and learn different things if it weren't for this terrible thing that was done to our country by our fellow Americans. But we're fighting. Keep fighting the good fight, and keep your chins down and your head up. And I hope you will join me again next Saturday afternoon at 4. And in the meantime, have a wonderful, blessed weekend. And Hans and Fool, thanks so much again, gentlemen. I'll talk to you soon.